excited to have a fantastic panel of speakers with us today as we explore this topic. So first off, we have Dr. Vanessa Chan. Dr. Chan is the Chief Commercialization Officer at the Department of Energy and the Director of the Office of Technology Transitions. We have Randolph Bell, Distinguished Fellow from the Atlantic Council, as well as an Associate Partner with Dentons Global Advisors. And Maciej Kolakowski. I practiced. I'm sure I did a horrible job. Manager of Advanced Energy Solutions at the World Economic Forum. And we at EPRI are very fortunate that we work with all three of these folks and their teams across the board at the Institute to really help drive emerging technologies and what I like to call shrinking the white space. So when I think about the technologies that we have in our system today, and where we are in terms of scaling those technologies, operating those technologies, maintaining those technologies, and even starting to retire some of them. And then I look at the technologies that are currently in development, in very early deployment, many of them. And I look at kind of the space in between that and the time in that space. I call that shrinking the white space. How do we take those technologies that are not quite ready for full scale deployment and accelerate them as much as we possibly can to the right, so we can achieve these very broad economy-wide decarbonization goals as quickly as possible, while also maintaining reliability, affordability, and resilience of our overall energy system. So that's really kind of where we're going to start exploring the conversation today. And so before I get into a bunch of questions, maybe I'll just kind of go through each panelist and let you guys do a brief introduction and give your own opening remarks. And Vanessa, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for organizing this. Here at DOE, we are long-term partners with EPRI and really appreciate everything that you guys are doing. So here at the Office of Technology Transitions, we are very much focused on trying to do exactly what you're saying, Neva, is accelerate the timeline through which we can actually get technologies to market. And so later on, I'll talk a lot about the things that I'm doing here as a steward of commercialization on behalf of DOE, of what we're trying to do to activate the private sector so that we can end up having a transition that is private sector led but government enabled. And so hopefully many of you guys here are willing to roll up your sleeves after this and figure out how we're going to all do this together.
Wonderful. Thanks, Vanessa. Randolph, why don't you go next?
Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks for inviting me and working with the Atlantic Council. It's a pleasure to be here. So my perspective is a global one, where we see the need for these technologies perhaps even greater than we might see in the United States. So if you look at the technologies that we're talking about, CCS, hydrogen, long duration storage, these are all technologies to help manage an increasingly renewables-dominated electricity system, essentially managing variability both in the short and seasonal terms. And depending on where you are in the world, you need that sooner than certain other places where you can get higher renewable penetrations faster. So I think about Japan, where renewables penetration is, we look at a very low maximum there. And so we really need to move faster for a country like Japan if it's going to meet its climate goals. Same for South Korea, for instance. But then I also think back to the United States, where some of the variable challenges with renewables could be solved with transmission. But who's going to bet on that versus perhaps deploying something like CCS on a faster timescale? So it's really worth having all of these technologies at our disposal if we are going to move very, very quickly to meet our goals.
Absolutely. I'm excited to dive into both those conversations. But before we do that, okay, Maciej, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're thinking?
Thanks very much, Neva, and thanks very much to EPRI for the invitation. Indeed, we also have a privilege to collaborate with EPRI, particularly on net zero, industrial clusters, and other things. So delighted to be here. My name is Maciej Kołaczkowski. I manage the Advanced Energy Solutions work here at the World Economic Forum. So in that scope, we look at those most innovative, transformative solutions from clean hydrogen, sustainable aviation fuels, also on the storage solutions, carbon management, small modular reactors. So I think you guys said that the key question for us is, how we can accelerate and scale of what we have. When we look at solar and wind, it took 30, 40 years to achieve type of scale, industrialization, competitiveness where they are today. While when we look from the energy system perspective, clean hydrogen, sustainable aviation fuel, storage, and all those solutions, they need to pretty much go through a similar journey, but now in years as opposed to decades before. So amazing opportunity for everyone. Huge challenge, clearly, because this was amazing what wind and solar did, but actually how you even do this pretty much 5-10 times faster in 4 or 5 different effectively new industries emerging on continuous basis for next decade. That's pretty huge. I have some numbers maybe we'll give you in a moment when you also to put into perspective how huge actually this challenge is when looking at those different segments.
Absolutely. Well, and so I want to dive into the conversation of scale. I want to dive into the, the global perspective and of course the importance of public-private partnerships. But maybe first, when you sit in, I'm sure we've all been in a million panel discussions like this. And one of the things you always hear as an answer is, well, we need to balance priorities. Right, we need to balance the priority of achieving decarbonization with resilience and reliability and affordability. And that's always an answer, right? Well, we're going to balance priorities. But so my question is, how do we start thinking about truly balancing priorities while still achieving these goals that have been set out there?
So I can start. I mean, I think it's I'm a little bit hesitant about balancing priorities, meaning like there's one technology versus another that's more important. I personally think that it's kind of like Pokemon. You got to collect them all. We need all of them in order to meet our really ambitious goals, because we're trying to go for a carbon-free power sector by 2035 and a net zero emissions economy by 2050. That's only 12 and 27 years away. And the good news, right, is that we have Bill and IRA, which is $1 trillion investment that we need to use to activate the 30 trillion in the private sector. I think the biggest issue I have isn't so much prioritization, but it's more a mindset, where what I'm seeing is that the private sector is, very much concerned around we're not able to support a green premium, and we're not, we're worried about the returns on these investments. And if you think about some of the very large scale industries, they're always trying to eke the last drop out of their sunk capital costs. And so trying to create new technologies and deploy the capital for it can be difficult if you're worried about dividends and quarterly earnings and so forth. And so really, instead of the priorities, it's more for me about unlocking the chicken and the egg situation, where for all these technologies, the supply chain will not set up unless it knows it has a demand offtake agreement. The demand offtake agreement will not happen unless they know have a stable supply chain. And everyone's willing to be the 5th or 6th mover. No one wants to be the 1st to 4th. So I really have more of a call to action around, we have these amazing equities now through Bill and IRA. We have been doing a lot to get everyone on the same page around what it takes. And I just need people to roll their sleeves up and start investing capital. That's really, for me, what the challenge is.
Great. Fantastic, Vanessa. Other thoughts from Randolph or Maciej?
Well, I'm happy to jump in, because I think I couldn't emphasize more the point of Vanessa that all those different solutions that help you address different things on the net zero path or our energy transition, whatever is the goal. So it's really not one or the other, but from system perspective, you really need them pretty much all. But I imagine, depending on where you exactly are, in what geography, what are exactly your priorities, then you need to choose your own menu of things. But to give you a couple of numbers, in 2030, to be on a net zero, we did some numbers. It's not it's from publicly available sources, but I collected in one place, if you will. So for battery storage, we'll need an investment of $150 billion just in 2030, $130 billion in clean hydrogen, $100 billion to manage carbon, and then other advanced energy solutions. Total is 550, maybe $600 billion that we'll need to globally bring in. So it's not necessarily to prioritize between them. is how you actually grow all of them, how then they come together, and I think also very importantly how they fit, how they can leverage and gain scale in kind of sync with the existing system. Because so that's one. And then clearly, I think what's also a key challenge is the cost aspect here. Of course, some of the solutions may need to still perhaps excel the technology or make it fully ready for deployment, but cost is a universal challenge there. To achieve really great scale, we will need to do much better on cost side. So I think this is. If I'm thinking about priorities, this is something that definitely we need to, maybe it's a different way of thinking. But on the positive side, what we're hearing, for example, when we talk to investors, financial institutions, banks, they say there is no shortage of capital to support growth, but it's very difficult to match projects, the investment opportunities with the profile that the actual concrete kind of providers of capital or other funding are seeking. So this is also where we see, and maybe we'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. This is also where we see a big role, for example, for the World Economic Forum to play, is to help support these industry business partnerships between large energy companies, innovators, maybe large energy users as well as investors. Because this is, we think, one of the practical few opportunities that we have to really accelerate, to leverage those more to gain scale. And efficient partnerships there will be key.
I'll just add one thing, which is that the phrase balancing priorities sometimes, though not always, but sometimes is really a coded language for doing nothing. It really is, and so it's actually a misnomer. They're not balancing priorities. They are prioritizing one thing, which is cost, which is that the trajectory of the current system is for the folks who are operating the system the cheapest cost, and so programs like we're seeing through the IRA that bring the cost down, and we need to see more of these in other jurisdictions, and there are other countries are starting to move forward. Those are the things that actually get the projects done. But I think when anyone says we need to balance priorities, we need to make sure that we ask them what their priorities really are, because they may not be paying the cost, but there will be a cost incurred on the system as we see extreme weather events increase, heat, et cetera. And those are costs that are external, of course, to the people who are saying we need to balance priorities. So I just think we want to be honest with ourselves about what they really mean.
So Pokemon, coded language to do nothing. I love the perspectives, and I love, the idea of building your own energy transition adventure, because it's really what it is based on where you are in the world and what technologies are out there for you and what your companies in your regions and your economy's priorities may be. But so Vanessa, maybe we'll go to you next, and really looking towards, I've heard you speak, and I've had the opportunity to speak with you many times. But you talk a lot about the importance of public-private partnerships and advancing the practicality of all of this happening and deploying cutting edge technologies. So maybe you can talk to us just a little bit more about how you envision that, how that role works, and what some of your thoughts are.
Totally. So in order to bring technologies to market, so to get through the research, development, demonstration to deployment continuum, that's how we define commercialization here at DOE. There's not one single organization that can do it. It has to take an entire ecosystem to do it. And, there's been a couple of times when I've been really inspired by other industries that have done that. I think Moore's Law, when they were trying to double the number of transistors on a chip, they had to get the entire ecosystem to innovate on the CMOS process. And so Semitech had created a roadmap to let everyone know what are the things that all the different players, including competitors, had to do to realize that. So using that as inspiration, here at OTT, we've quarterbacked something called Pathways to Commercial Liftoff, which you can find at liftoff.energy.gov. And I like the head nodding because it means people have read it. And really what this is we spend a few years in engaging with industry stakeholders and really understanding what is going to take to have these key energy technologies reach commercial liftoff. So we've looked at not just the technology barriers, but also cost barriers, the regulatory barriers, other things that are really impeding commercialization. And we've released 8 reports. There's one on clean hydrogen, one on advanced nuclear, carbon management, long duration energy storage, virtual power plants, industrial decarbonization, chemicals and refining, and cement. And the reason why we prioritized these was that we wanted to make sure that all the funding opportunity announcements through Bill and IRA were going to be baked in a roadmap that everyone could be resonating off of. And so these were used to inform the money going out the door here at Department of Energy. And we know that the private sector is reading these because they're coming back to us in the applications referring to liftoff reports. So if you guys have not read the liftoff reports, I really highly recommend you do it. That's at liftoff.energy.gov, because it's a way for us to drive a private sector led but government enabled energy transition. And there's been a lot of culture change here. And I think the liftoff reports are a great indication of it, which is there's quite a few people like myself who come from the private sector, and we understand what it means to have a business model that actually works and people can make money. And that is what's required to activate the 30 trillion, because in the end, it's the private sector that's really bringing these to market. And one of the things that we know, anyone who's done commercialization, is what we know now is probably wrong 6 months, 12 months from now. So all these reports are live on liftoff.energy.gov, meaning as you guys are doing more in the private sector and learning more, we're going to update the assumptions so that we can keep tweaking the pathways. Now that's new, because normally in government, you get a report from 2021 and you refer to it. This is not it. This is us trying to drive an ecosystem dialogue. And so I really hope to get feedback from all of you, but that's really how we're trying to think about public-private partnerships, is really how do we get on the same page together.
Fantastic. Thank you, Vanessa. And for all, just so everyone knows, I dropped the link to liftoff.energy.gov in the chat here. It's one of my hot links. Us at EPRI, we have reviewed all of them, and they're very well done. Yeah. Wonderful. I don't know if Randolph or Maciej, would you guys like to comment on any of that before I go down to the next pathway of questions? Okay, perfect. Well, so maybe we'll shift a little bit to, Vanessa, very much you bring this amazing U.S. perspective on how are we in the United States going to drive towards, enabling technologies. So maybe we'll shift to even more of a global perspective. And Randolph, maybe you can cover this. And what are some of your thoughts on how the U.S. can learn from others, so others can learn from the U.S., and we can really enable the collaborative best practices to accelerate technology?
Yeah, so of course, it all depends on what technology you're talking about and where it is on its maturity level. But there are a number of things that can be done. I think, first off, I think one of the best lessons that any other country outside the U.S. can learn from the U.S. is its approach to commercialization and multiple shots on goal. It's not investing in a particular technology pathway. It's investing in a sector. It's investing in advanced nuclear. It's investing in long duration storage. It's investing in any carbon capture. It's investing in a lot of different things, but not picking winners because ultimately one of these might work. We just don't know which one. And so I've seen in a number of different technologies, countries pick a national champion. And sometimes that works out really well because they can put the whole government behind it, but sometimes it doesn't. And so having the kind of optionality around the technologies is really, really important. Another thing is research collaboration. Obviously, private companies, they need to own their IP, et cetera. But again, depending on where they are in their development, their technology readiness, they may need some basic research. And so ensuring internationally that research labs are working in coordination so that they're not duplicating efforts, but providing complementary efforts is another really, really valuable thing that can accelerate globally. Then, of course, there's trade issues. The IP has to be structured properly, et cetera. I'll stop there, but I think that there's a lot of things we can talk about for collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. You use the word optionality. It's one of my favorite words. And I tell people all the time, and a lot of people on the webcast have probably heard it, optionality is not an option. It is a requirement as we go through this transition. And many times we talk about optionality and we talk about the idea of the Pokemon card, like Pokemon, right? You need to make sure you have lots of different technologies that are out there that you could potentially use. But optionality is even more than that, because optionality means you may have this whole slew of choices and you pick one and you start going down the pathway, but then there's an enabler or there's a detractor, something happens and you need to jump on a different pathway. And so optionality, not just in what you can choose from, but leaving optionality in your pathways as you make your decisions to be able to shift from one decision to another, I think is really important. It always resonates with me.
No, that's exactly why these liftoff reports are live, is because as we learn more, we're going to have to change the pathways. And, echoing what, Randolph says, we've been very deliberate in these pathway reports. We don't choose winners or losers. Even within long duration energy storage, there's like hundreds of technologies out there, but it's more, what do you have to believe? Given what we know now, some of these are tougher putts than others, but the putt could be made. And some of the easy putts might not work at all. So it's really more, what do you have to believe to get there? And then using the Bill and IRA funding to help buy down the risk so that we can really activate the private sector so that we can move quickly on these.
I want to get back to buying down risk and just de-risking technology in a second. So I'm just taking a note because I think that's such an important concept we all need to talk about. But I do want to jump real quick to timing and scale, right? So Ajay, in your beginning comments, you talked a lot around timing and scale and what that actually means. And from a global perspective, what are your thoughts on that?
Thanks very much, Niva. One comment before I go there on the flexible like a policy that just above, of course, you don't pick winners and losers. But I think there is also something about stability and long-term kind of certainty for those different schemes and support. I think, like, for example, one thing I'm hearing about IRA is it's amazing all the investment now just goes into US, but even European companies, they just basically invest in US whatever they want to do. At the same time, there's a lot of uncertainty what happens in 2, 4 or like years or beyond. And for example, in Europe, people have experience also when like with biofuels or other things that there's a big push. 5 years later, kind of direction change, and people get stranded with kind of their investments, if you will. Clearly, if you don't pick winners and losers, that's that's helpful. But there is, I think, this aspect. One thing I wanted to mention also, and I think it's about these public-private partnerships. In some segments, particularly, I'm sure you see the same thing on new nuclear, like advanced nuclear. There's like shortage of skills. There is just a whole generation of people that they are basically retiring or retired. We haven't built really any plant in 40 years. No one really knows. People don't know how to also kind of build that on the side. And now you need this cohorts of thousands. I'm hearing in France itself, 40,000 like nuclear skilled people are needed just in France. And so how to bring this back, how business can partner with educational institutions, research institutions, promote PhD research, and this type of stuff. And some of those segments can also be interesting. Now, going back to speed and scale, I think it's like everyone is on the same page. That's probably really the key. Those Randall mentioned those solutions, those technologies are on different readiness kind of levels. Like battery storage is ready. I guess clean hydrogen seems to be ready. That it's growing. Clean hydrogen capacity grew by 50% last year. Of course, it's from small numbers, but it's happening slowly. Battery storage capacity grew by 75% last year. So nice, huge growth, but of course, very small number actually. So it's happening. And then, of course, when we think about probably carbon management technologies, slightly later, for sure, direct air carbon capture needs more work. Small modular reactors still not there yet as well. So I think it's all to say that those that are ready, we just need to move and build as much as possible, as quick as possible. I had some ideas, that your demonstration plant should be 1 million tons of something, or carbon, or like, or hydrogen or something. So start to think big. And then probably for those that still need innovation, really completing the technology, is probably different types of supports and partnerships that's needed to accelerate that. And those will kick in. It just they have a role, but in a different place on the timeline. So they all comes into play and needs to start growing very fast, very quick. When we look at the trajectories where we are at with this kind of growth pace and plans, all the plans, not even a commitment, but like really plans. At best, maybe we're at a third where we need to be, depending on the solutions. Many of them is like a fifth where we need to be, or 10th. And I'm talking 2030. So there is a really big gap there. And again, of course, we discuss policy, regulation. There is a big role to play. But from my side, we really believe in those for acceleration. That one practical opportunity is in the business partnerships. So basically, all innovators really keen to work with large companies, whether energy companies or consumers, want to work with innovation. There is capital available, but everyone finds it really difficult to work with others for different reasons. Some want to be transactional, some want real partnership. It's difficult to screen. I think even for largest companies, simply the scale of projects, investments that they need just don't match this small kind of early stage project. They want to deploy $1 billion per project, not a 10 million or 50 million. So streamlining that, we really think is a big one. And there is no one answer how to do that, of course. But one thing that we want to do is develop, and that's why I'm so excited also to be here, guys, with you, because there is huge need to have holistic, systemic discussion about those solutions. So also large organizations, they really need to think like holistically about that. So having this narrative, articulating clearly what those solutions really help achieve is important, because I think we know, but when it comes to really what they do, it's not clear for non-experts.
For sure.
So, I wanted to pick up on something that you had said, and Randall said as well, around TRLs, technology readiness levels, because we're really trying to change the language on commercialization. And what I found is that you can get to TRL 9. TRL is developed by NASA to launch rockets to the moon. And, you can get to a technology readiness level of 9, which is the best. And then you can get a rocket launch, but that's insufficient to actually get you to full scale deployment. So here at OTT, we developed something called adoption readiness levels, which I'm going to drop here in the chat, which is to complement TRLs. And it's all the other things besides technology that you need to get right in order to get to market deployment. So including things like cost that people have mentioned, things like the demand side, all of that. And I think it's really important for us to not just talk about TRLs, because oftentimes scientists and engineers only think about the technology milestones, like kind of more of a build it, they will come. And I have a PhD, so I come from that learnings. And so I think really having the kind of this aerial approach, I know, Niva, you're going to talk a little about risk in a little bit, I think is really important, because we can't just talk about technology risk. Actually, in the energy transition, I'm less worried about the technology. I'm much more worried about all the other things that we have to get right.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Vanessa. And we see that. Obviously EPRI is a research and development company, so we live in technology and we're technology agnostic. But the fact is, in order to truly deploy technology at the scale we're talking about, you need to consider the entire ecosystem around that to see it happen. So I love what you guys have done with the adoption readiness levels. Really, really applicable. Wonderful. So another well, let's jump into de-risking technology. And heads up, if you are one of the participants on this webcast, I'm about to turn to you. So start thinking about your questions. Feel free to start dropping them in the chat or in the Q&A bucket, wherever you're comfortable doing that, because we want to talk about what you want to hear about. But I'd like to shift us to the idea of de-risking some of these technologies. And to Vanessa's point, not just the technology itself, but the deployment of at-scale technology, and how can we be thinking about that, or should we be thinking about that to de-risk it for the entire ecosystem? And I'll kind of ask that generic question to all of you, if anybody would like to jump in.
Well, let's talk not about technology for a second, since we were sort of having that conversation, which is that there are plenty of technologies that are even mature but are hard to develop. So if you think about Gen 3 nuclear, that is a mature net zero technology that can be deployed, and you can start building now. And if you look at the UAE, they've developed a nuclear power plant in what would now be considered record time. And that's dramatically changed their electricity mix. And that was not a new technology. That was bringing about a new way of organizing the operation, a new way of building to get that done. Really bringing back an old way, but anyway, a different way than we've been trying for a while. And so that's, I think, a really important thing to think about when you're looking at startups or companies that are developing technology. The technology might be great. They may not be able to run a business. They may not be thinking beyond, how to get it out of the lab. They may not be thinking about all the other things that are necessary for that technology to move quickly. And that's, there's a business side, there's a policy side where there could be regulatory issues that need to be gotten ahead of now, as opposed to when the technology is ready. There could be social license issues that they need to start thinking about now, because if they want to deploy in a community in 8 years, they need to start moving dirt in 4 years. And so they need a site, and you start working backwards. And if you're not doing all those things in parallel, then no matter how great the technology is, it's not going to move quickly if you've not addressed all these other issues.
Yeah, and the thing I want to add is some of the things that we're doing here at DOE to really help with the risk side of it. In the end, when you're trying to bring something to market, it boils down to 3 really simple things. One is, are you solving a problem that people care about? Second, do you have a solution that you can sell at a price that people are willing to pay? And 3, can you deliver it at a cost where every single person in the value chain can make money? It doesn't matter if you're selling headphones or you're selling clean hydrogen. That is what matters. And so I think a lot of the risk that people are very nervous about is, and I think, several panelists have talked about this, is the cost required to actually get something there. And if you want to make money right now, you're not going to be able to sell things at the price that consumers are willing to pay for it. And so that's where I get excited about the work we've been doing to try to de-risk, because the reason why you have a very high cost originally in the first few first of a kinds is that you don't have the scale to drive the cost down. So that's why people don't want to be the first to fourth or fifth. They want to be later when the costs are a little bit lower. So I'm sure all of you guys know about the $7 billion solicitation for the 6 to 10 hydrogen hubs that was solicited by the Office of Clean Energy demonstration. And that a lot of that was informed by the liftoff report on clean hydrogen. But on the other side of it, which I'm even more excited about, is we released a request for proposals soliciting an independent entity to administer a demand side initiative in support of these regional hydrogen hubs. And the reason why is we can do the supply. If we don't do the demand, then that risk matching can't happen. And so the question is, how do we get the stuff we've done with the supply side matched to the demand side, so in the end, the risk is kind of felt to be okay on both. And once we activate those 6 to 10, then the rest will follow because we can get to a scale.
Fantastic. So I'm going to pull that string a little bit, Vanessa, and I think it ties to one of the questions we just saw here in the chat, at least part of it. We've heard a little bit about hydrogen from yourself and what's going on with the hydrogen hubs, but the importance of the demand side. But, we talk about the chicken or the egg. And one of the things, one of the guys on my team always says is, well, it's a little less about the chicken and the egg. It's also about the coop. And we can't forget the coop, and the coop being in terms of hydrogen, the delivery and storage part of it. So are there thoughts here from anybody in this group around what does that potentially look like for the role of clean hydrogen in the future?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're going to get to at scale, you need to get that midstream transportation done with piping and all that. The hydrogen hubs right now, they're doing it at kind of more local level. The thing I will say is that there is a midstream private pipe that's owned by oh my gosh, the gas company in Pennsylvania. I'm blanking on their name, but it's demonstrated that we actually can build these things, or someone has been able to build these things. And so we also know how to pipe natural gas, right? So in the US, we know how to do these things. We just have to figure out how do we actually get to a scale where people are willing to invest in that infrastructure. But I feel confident once we have the hydrogen hubs there and established, we have the demand side of it, then these other things will come. And so I totally, agree with the question that Vikram has posted in the chat around, there's still a lot of surrounding transport and storage questions, but we have to kind of just start somewhere. Anyone in commercialization knows it's a mess, like meaning you have to start here and then just go, right? And you're going to pivot as you go. It's not like a linear, here's the thing that's going to work. So I think the hydrogen hubs will be a catalyst for a lot of this other stuff to be happening.
Just adding to that, one small point. Also, ammonia. If you're thinking about the ammonia as a hydrogen carrier, we have ammonia pipelines in the Midwest. I think one of them just recently got shut down, but we know how to do that. We know how to ship ammonia internationally as well. There's really legitimate questions about cost, et cetera, but we know how to do it. So if we can drive the cost down, then it's something that's doable.
Absolutely.
I think there is something also on this demand side that's a very important question. And for me, that's striking. So on one hand, I quoted these huge numbers, how much we need of all of this so quick. But then on the other hand, talking to many who have those solutions and technology, they say like, oh, it's nice, but there is no demand. Actually, no one is really ready to buy it for the kind of price we offer today. So how we reconcile those two, I think it's a big question here. And of course, I think there's this first mover's disadvantage, if you will, or this is often, I guess, what people also say, that on one hand, you need some people to make a commitment, pay the green premium that Vanessa mentioned to drive scale. But then this means that from the scale and the lower price, all competitors benefit, only those that invested early stuck with expensive kind of supply contracts. So there is also a little bit I think there is a big question about that, like how we approach demand, how can we move forward. I was even recently actually surprised to hear this as a challenge in actually small modular, in the advanced nuclear sector that I would imagine doesn't maybe have other questions and other challenges rather than a lack of potential demand for their solutions. So I think there is also something about that.
Absolutely. Well, and so there's some other questions in the chat here. Actually, I'm going to jump to the one on higher interest rates first, because I mean, obviously everybody's watching the economy across the board. So any thoughts on the effect of the higher interest rate environment, which might persist on the opportunity to deploy clean energy technologies that are capital intensive?
I wish it wasn't that way. It makes it a little bit harder, right, to go do it. It is what it is, but there are other things that, we have at our disposal with like the loan program office and other things like that to, help us. But, it is what it is. And it's not the first time that we've seen high interest rate environments. So I think the question is, can one also see the opportunity of the bill and IRA as being a point in time right now to be focused on, and realizing at some point the interest rates will go down, and just like our home, you can always refinance later, is kind of the way I personally think about it. But it's hard with folks who are very much focused on quarterly earnings and things like that to wrap their head around.
Okay. Other thoughts from others? What are we seeing globally in terms of that?
Project developers are all thinking the same thing. This makes it harder for the numbers to pencil out compared to existing technologies. So the CapEx has already been expended, et cetera. But in the end, they need to do it. And so they're just trying to figure out ways of getting it done. And so this is where the public-private partnerships become even more important. So.
Agreed. Well, and so, one of the things that we have seen, or, I think I've personally seen over the past year, is this shift from the conversation just purely around hydrogen to a broader conversation around alternate energy carriers and low carbon fuels, whether that be a biofuel, a synthetic fuel, a pure hydrogen derived fuel, and e-fuel. Everybody likes to call the same things different things, although they all have different, pieces to them. But so have you guys seen that conversation expand, and what are your thoughts on that? There's a question here specifically on e-methanol for hydrogen carriers, et cetera. But I mean, it's been very clear to me and exciting to me, honestly, how that conversation has matured over the past year.
Yeah, it's something that is happening. That conversation is happening everywhere, and there's tremendous interest because you can think about these hydrogen carriers or e-fuels or whatnot as long duration storage at some level. I mean, the gas grid in the United States holds about a month of energy. So if you think about that as long duration storage. Then that's one way of solving that problem. There are, I think, real questions about the round trip efficiency that are a potential limiting factor on some of these fuels. And so the electrification, when you can, is still the most efficient way of getting this stuff done. There are technologies, there are use cases where you can't electrify, at least not yet. And so the pathway does seem to be that direction. And so we need to explore it. Absolutely. Again, going back to the previous point about optionality. But I think we want to make sure that we're not, when you look at projected costs, best estimates, taking into account the round trip efficiency, we don't overspend in that area.
Yeah, and my whole take on this one is, once again, we don't choose winners. So, if there are folks who are excited by e-methanol and they want to go that way, great. If there are folks excited about ammonia and they want to go that way, great. And I think a lot of it has to do with the boundary conditions for each of the different areas. There's certain areas where ammonia makes more sense. There's certain areas where methanol may make more sense. And so I think we honestly need them all. So I honestly don't care in some ways what the carrier is, because I think anyone who is willing to invest to make that work is what we need to go do.
Yeah. If you look at Japan, they're have tremendous existing coal-fired power plant assets, and not many options for decarbonization in terms of renewables or carbon capture. The geology isn't great there, so they'd have to ship the CO2 elsewhere, which is something people are considering. But if this works, importing clean ammonia into a coal-fired power plant may be a cheapest option because they already have the coal asset, and so they have that there. Again, there's legitimate questions to be asked about it, but it's also really, really important to explore these options, given as you say, the boundary conditions that they have.
Yeah. Well, Machai, I think we're seeing as we look at, we're talking about hydrogen hubs in the US and direct air capture hubs and different types of hubs. What we see globally is the net zero industrial cluster approach, which is, for those of you who may not be super familiar, very similar to the approach we're taking with hydrogen hubs, et cetera, except it's not just a certain technology focus, right? It is really comprehensive in terms of all options, focused on a localized economy, and having more integrated approaches to a localized economy's decarbonization pathways. And that's really what the World Economic Forum and EPRI have been focused on together. So maybe you can there's a question in the chat here around that partnership, what we're doing there, and how the organizations complement each other.
For sure. Thanks, Niva. No, I think the net zero industrial clusters, I think the concept is pretty amazing. First, because the ambition is big there. Let's get 100 industrial clusters in different places in the world, and let's help them become net zero. First, adopt a target like this, and then let them move forward. But I think second great aspect of that is that they are very practical. So they are localized. This is actual thing that may happen, as opposed to us kind of continue having a conversation. So I think it's pretty nice link that together with EPRI we're able to make between this global and local. Of course, it will depend, and these hubs are everywhere. So there are some, the clusters, are everywhere. Some of them are in US, in Europe, in China, and other places. So that's truly global effort with local impact. The basic idea is, that you will have all this range of players on different sides of the industrial spectrum, energy spectrum, infrastructure, all that, ports and all this. And then they will need different types of collaboration, I think sharing opportunities on their journey to net zero. So it can be hydrogen, can be CO2 infrastructure, capture projects and things like this. I think the point here is a little bit, again, how we bring new solutions and then fit into what exists, what we're already doing, make sense, bring collaborations, bring different stakeholders together. So I think this is what we're trying to do there. And as such, advanced energy solutions are always a part of those discussions because they enable you this decarbonization journey.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, and one of the things I really love about the cluster approach, and I was so excited when we started to see the announcements out of the Department of Energy in that approach, was the idea that it is really specific to a local economy, right? And it's serving the communities that it is in and kind of empowering those communities to take these pathways together. So, but that ties to, we have a couple questions here in the chat around what does that mean for workforce? And you guys can skim the questions. I'm not going to read all of that, step by step, but workforce and people are such an important part of this. The type of workforce, what will be required? Are there certain technologies that may be easier to transition a workforce? I'm sure there's lots of opinions on that. And how should we really be thinking about how to prepare ourselves right now for all of this investment that's going to happen as we move forward to get that workforce ready? So I'll stop blabbing and let you guys blab. Ready, go.
Here, I can start. So you'll see in the adoption readiness levels, workforce is actually one of the dimensions that we highlight because you need to be able to manufacture and do things, which requires a workforce to go do it. I think that right now we have a lot of areas where there's kind of holes. Welders we need people who can do electrical installations and so forth. And, to the question in the chat from Annalicia, a lot of those are trade based jobs. And so I think there is a need in order for us to think holistically around how do we catalyze more of that. I have a senior in high school and, they never had anyone come to talk to us about trade schools or anything like that. And so I think there's something that needs to be done starting in the high school arena and maybe middle school to have people think about those tracks. In Germany, they're much better about this where they start talking about trade school tracks early on, and then people can choose to do the trade school track or the more traditional four-year university. And it's, part of the fabric of how German education is done. And so I think there's a question around how do we get to that point where folks are looking at trades as being a viable pathway and being encouraged in our lower school systems to actually go do that. And right now we have an actual Office of Clean Energy Jobs. Bethany Jones leads it, and that's all she's thinking about. So she is the right person to talk to. And Siri, I'm happy to connect you with her, because I think in the end, we need someone to be really thinking about this in a systematic way, because this is a big, big, big question. And in fact, it even extends beyond energy, because a lot of the other industries beside energy have the same workforce shortages, right? In terms of welders and things like that.
Fantastic. Thank you. Randolph or Machai, do you have any ideas on that?
Just one quick note on this is that we're in a very low unemployment time right now, and we'll see how long that lasts. But that does suggest that we're going to have to start making choices about what we do in the United States versus what we have our friends and allies be producing. So we won't be able to manufacture everything here while deploying and finding enough people, et cetera. And so I think that's a hard conversation that I don't know if we're quite there yet as a country to have that conversation, because I think this is a sort of a nascent, the Office of Clean Energy Jobs is relatively new, and this is starting to come, but it's something that has been on my radar for a little while, is the ultimate the challenge of the limits of the number of people we have and how much we actually want to accomplish. So just something that I think about sort of in the medium term as something that we're going to have to reckon with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think Randolph brought an interesting angle with the workforce question, but clearly in this deployment of those and building out those industries, there is this industrial policy component, let's say. So every country also, of course, it's an energy system, energy transition question, but every country also is answering their own kind of question in terms of what is my place in this industry as part of my industrial policy? Am I like supplier there? Do I provide technologies? Where do we stand in that? So I think there is also this aspect that has multiple facets, including also, of course, supply chains, including raw materials. Then, of course, skills is part of that. So I think that's also something to keep an eye on. And of course, there are some countries that really dominate this market and probably will continue doing a lot of this. And on the skill side, I think there are two levels to this. One is this at an industry level, we mentioned nuclear, thousands that are needed, probably. So that's one. But then clearly there will be impact also on people as this transition progresses. So I think again there is this point how those things come together. It was a while back. There was quite extensive coverage I saw in press. How this looks in the practice in UK, for example, when they used to have like let's say traditional fossil fuel based industry. Now some of those guys now install like renewable energy or other things, so they make like half, and and they don't know if their job is actually there next year or following year. So there is something also about that, the systemic level, but then when you think about the impact on concrete jobs, it's not always, we just need to be mindful that it's not that I do oil and gas today, will do solar panels tomorrow as a person, or so there is also, I think, something about managing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and so I want to get to the question in the chat around costs in a second, because we talked a lot about costs and it's important, but I feel remiss if we don't actually at least say the words. What about the supply chain? Vanessa, you said the words earlier. I think we've all said the words sometime, but how concerned are you really around the whole world, more or less, is really trying to drive towards, this clean energy transition? And there's so many technologies that we're going to use to do it. Is the supply chain going to be able to handle it? And how worried are we about true global competition to make it happen? Competition's good. I don't know. Thoughts?
I wouldn't say the word worried. I would say this is really complicated. And, unlike kind of the CMOS example I shared with you, that was a kind of much more simple supply chain. This one is super, super complicated with places where, we're short on certain parts of the supply chain and so forth. And so I do think, though, that the time right now feels different than any other time for the clean energy transition. I'm feeling an urgency across governments. I'm feeling an urgency in the private sector. And I do believe in human ingenuity and getting stuff done. I really do. And so I'm not worried, because I think we will rise to the occasion. I mean, the fact that, we have these liftoff reports, which we started in September and got on a website in March, is like unheard of 6 months in terms of how quickly we're moving. So, I'm in someone who's kind of a disruptor. And so if you had told me 3 years ago I was going to be joining the federal government, I'd be like, there's no way. I'm a fast mover. I'm entrepreneurial. They don't want me and I will annoy them. But this is not at all the case. Everyone's hungry to move fast. And so I'm not a bureaucratic person. So I actually am not worried, because I think there's a lot of people who right now feel empowered to do something together. So I'm an optimist, though.
That's good. It's a good thing.
There are real geopolitical challenges from certain parts of the clean energy supply chain that need to be managed. However, I also am an optimist. I actually think that will drive technology and will drive technological change. If we can't fix the piece of the supply chain for one reason or another, we will come up with, as fingers crossed, right? We will come up with solutions around that. And so necessity is the mother of invention. So we have to keep pushing on that and recognizing that supply chain is a potential risk, and that we need to incentivize developing solutions that are technology solutions around that. But that doesn't seem entirely outside the realm of possibility.
Yeah, my 3 cents to that will be that first, clearly depending on the exact solutions we're talking about, those challenges will be different. Different if you want to produce batteries or like battery cells, different maybe if you want to build a small modular reactors industry in the future. So I think that's one. But then second, maybe these are some of those trade-offs or like prioritizations that we will need to make. So as we said, all the solutions, we need them, that's for sure. But maybe this will be the prioritization. Maybe we really need to answer ourselves the questions what we're trying to solve for. So because it will be difficult to solve for everything, like address the climate, affordable energy, million jobs, a lot of tax income and other things. So maybe this is a bit prioritizations where we will sometimes need to say, okay, climate, that's a priority here. I'm okay to be in this segment importer, let's say, while others, maybe I strategically want to position myself because I'm so well like fit. So, but I'm with Randall and I think Vanessa, I think that's an opportunity. This will drive, eventually we need everyone to push to go ahead. I think IRA is great also in that respect because it really stirred the pot right now. Europe is thinking, wow, what can we do? How can we catch up? I think China is also going big. So no, that's eventually what needs to happen. Everyone just needs to go big and bigger and faster.
Fantastic. Well, we have like 2 minutes left. You talked about what are we trying to solve for, which gets us back to, can you really say you're balancing priorities? It's coded language to do nothing, right? Which we all know is not what we want. But so maybe kind of last quick thought, 1 or 2 things around what is 1 or 2 next milestones or next, I mean, there's a million announcements every day, but next announcement or next thing that you're looking for, would like to see that you can say, this is really, we're really getting there. We're really going there in the next, 12 months.
Oh, 12 months. I was hoping like 5 years because 5 years.
In the next 5 years. Nope, can't. That's too,
We don't have time.
Too
I would
easy.
like to see an announcement. First modular, like civil modular reactor is like up or designed or something like this. I'm excited.
All right, that's a good one. I like it. I like it. There's really a lot of exciting announcements around small modular reactors. All right.
Yeah.
Randolph, what do you think?
I would love to see, hydrogen hubs starting to sprout even beyond the 6 to 10 that are being activated by the Department of Energy, with people, believing that once those 6 to 10 go, the cost curve is going to start and they want to be on the bandwagon now. So I'd love to see people really getting excited with their own money on doing things.
I think you're going to see that. I actually do. I'm excited.
I do too, actually. That's why I said it.
Randolph.
There are a lot of MOUs and announcements and whatnot that are not worth the paper they are written on. I want to see commercial contracts and dirt getting moved.
Commercial contracts and dirt getting moved. I love that. Well, and so I'm sure as we go into COP season, UAE hosted this year, we're going to see a lot of new announcements. And I agree. I think it would be great to see more and more around commercial agreements and dirt getting moved. So with that, we are at the top of the hour. A huge thank you to all 3 of you for being here with us. And for those who had questions, if we didn't answer them, please just let us know. We can follow up with you. Hopefully you guys all enjoyed our Global Insight series, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you.
Everyone, thank you.
Have a good day.
Great job, Eva.